All right, let's go to the next question, which is going to be about sprint planning. This is an important one. So, who attends sprint planning? Well, it really depends on the company. Sometimes it's just the product owner and the Scrum Master. Sometimes it's the product owner slash product manager, you, Scrum Master, and the tech lead. Um, Generally speaking, from what I have seen, uh, you don't really bring anybody else into that meeting. Let me explain why. Because people get confused all the time. They're like, yeah, but I thought it's the whole team. I thought we're all gonna, do a little kumbaya, and all the developers would be there and stuff. Guys, developers' jobs are to uh, do the work, and they also have a job to give a technical assessment on complexity and effort for the work. That's their input, right? That's it. Product management, product owners, it's our job to decide what to work on next. Nobody else should be deciding that. There's nobody else that should be, providing guidance or decisions on that. Now, the reason why you might bring a tech lead into this meeting is simply because sometimes you might not be that technical, or you might not understand certain dependencies. So you want to go and work on a new, for example, chatbot, and your understanding is that the chatbot is going to call the existing search API. However, because it's an AI chatbot, as an example, the tech lead knows that we're going to have to create an integration with we're going to have to create an entire data replication in a different environment, or a different AI database, NoSQL database, and we're going to also need to have a new set of APIs for making these API calls, right? The tech lead might know that, and you might not know that, right? And that's why if the tech lead is there during sprint planning, they're going to slow you down and say, hey, hold on, we actually have a bunch of dependencies. We have some backend work that has to be done before we could pull this, these chatbot user stories into the next sprint. That's why you have a tech lead essentially at sprint planning. But there's literally no need for all the developers to be there, because the developers, they already gave their input. They've basically said their story points, their complexity and effort for the stories to be done, right? Why is the Scrum Master there? Well, obviously the Scrum Master is there to make sure the process is followed. And when it comes to sprint planning, what is that process? Well, the process is really the Scrum Master is going to determine the capacity for the next sprint. How many story points can you bring in to the next sprint? How do you calculate sprint capacity? Well, Scrum Masters typically would look at the past 3 sprints, and they'd look at how those developers performed in those sprints. Basically, they'll look at the burn down, right? Let's say in sprint 1, they had planned for 100 story points and they only accomplished 50. The burn down was 50, right? They actually underperformed. In sprint 2, maybe they did 100 points, and in sprint 3, maybe they did 150 points. So to calculate the capacity for sprint 4, I made the numbers easy there for you. 50 plus 100 plus 150, right? And that comes out to 50 plus 100 is 150 plus 150 is 300. 300 story points were done in the past 3 sprints. Divide that by 3 and it comes out to 100, right? So that means sprint number 4's capacity is going to be 100 points. So what does sprint planning look like, in Jira? Well, in Jira, right, we're talking about looking at the backlog again. And imagine you have a backlog of stories, and some of them have story points on them. And you have a new sprint. Let's just imagine sprint 8 is a new sprint. You could only pull in stories that have story points and that are ready for iteration status. So if you were dealing with 100 points, you would continue to select stories, and the Scrum Master will pull them in until the total, right now you can see it's at 36 points, until the total gets to 100 points, as an example, if the capacity was 100. And you wouldn't be allowed to go over 100 points. So, little pop quiz for you guys. When does sprint planning happen? Well, sprint planning, you're planning for the next sprint, right? Sprint planning will happen a few days prior to the next sprint. So if the sprint kicks off on Monday, you might actually do a sprint planning meeting on the Wednesday before, right? And on that Wednesday or that Thursday, you're meeting with the team, you've decided on what stories to pull in for the next sprint, and then it's locked and loaded. So when Monday comes around and the shotgun goes off and they're ready to start sprinting, the team knows what they're working on. And by the way, if you ever want to see the team working in a current sprint, that's where you're going to look at the board, right? Typically, the board or the Kanban board will have, all of the items in this various different stages in terms of the sprint and where they are, right? So typically, just so you understand, the sprint backlog would be those stories that are in dev in progress. Sometimes it might be in ready for iteration, but typically it will be like dev in progress. And as the stories get done every day, remember at daily stand-up, they give their status updates. As they finish, they're going to move those stories to QA testing. And let's say the sprint starts on Monday, the developer finishes work on Wednesday, they'll move this story number 20 as an example, to QA testing, right? So let's say it goes into dev in progress, and then from dev in progress, it's Monday, it's Tuesday, now it's Wednesday, they're done, that developer's finished, then they'll move it over to QA testing, right? The QA, whoever is the designated testing person, will then test it. And if there's bugs, they'll put comments in it. They might create an additional bug ticket for this associated with it, or they might just put the bug notes in the comments. Usually they'll actually click create and they'll create a bug and attach it to this story. So if there are bugs, it has to go back into dev in progress again. They'll go back there so they can finish development, correct the bugs, and before the sprint ends, get it retested. Once it finishes retesting, then it'll continue in the process. It'll go into maybe UAT or another environment. Obviously, it's not going to go to production. It might go to ready for production. And it's not going to go to production because nothing goes to production until the release. And we'll talk about that in the next little video that we do in about 1 second.